To the members of the public in the gallery, I would like to remind you that this planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so there is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future. Committee members, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic Car Park. Thank you. I'd like now for all the officers to introduce themselves, starting with Tim James, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Tim James, the Chief Legal Officer advising the committee. Thank you.
Rachel Beale, Democratic Services Officer.
Richard Lewis, Planning and Development Officer.
Paul Wheeldon, Highway Officer.
Craig Mead, Planning Policy Officer. Scott Jenkins, Planning Officer.
Sarah Hensby, Development Management Officer.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to the agenda. Item number 1, attendance. If you'll all sign the register, please, in the usual way. Are there any apologies, Rachel?
No, I haven't received any apologies.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Over to Tim James.
Thank you, Chair and members. Can I just remind you all that if you have any declarations, you please record them in the appropriate part of the attendance register where there's a sheet dealing with declarations. The declarations I'm aware of at the moment, members, are as follows. Firstly, Councillor Ashley, items 5 and 6 on the agenda, planning applications relating to land at Addit Walk and then to Gwent Square. I understand that you will wish to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in relation to those applications as a member of Cwmbran Community Council who are consultees. Is that correct, Councillor Ashley?
That is.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Fay Jones, I think the same in relation to both those applications, 5 and 6, personal non-prejudicial interest as a member of Cwmbran Community Council. Is that correct, Councillor Jones?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. And then, Chair, yourself, in relation to item 7 on the agenda, application new in Pontypool, I understand you wish to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest as a member of the Pontypool Community Council who were consulted. Is that correct, Chair?
That is correct.
Thank you. And then Councillor Gaynor James, also in relation to item 7, for the same reason, personal non-prejudicial interest as a member of Pontypool Community Council.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Overton, again in relation to item 7, you have a personal but non-prejudicial interest as a member of the Community Council, but in addition to that, I understand that because of comments you've previously made, you accept that you have certainly appear to have predetermined that application, and therefore, when that application is called, you will wish to leave the chamber and take no part in the debate. Is that correct, Councillor Overton?
Yes, that is correct.
Right. Thank you very much. Any other questions from members, please? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Can I ask Councillor Overton to turn his mic off, please?
Oh.
Thank you, Richard. Right. We'll go to item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee meeting of the 27th of February. I assume we've all read them. Could somebody say if they're a true record? Is that seconded? Thank you. Can I have a show of hands, everybody in favour? Thank you. Right, are there any questions or comments on these minutes before we move off them? No? Thank you. Item 4, which is review of third-party speaking rights. Now, Richard Lewis would like to introduce this item to committee, so it's over to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll notice from the report that a report came to the 25th of April 2017 Planning Committee where there were certain proposed changes to the third-party speaking rights that have been operating for some time. If you look on page 24, just at the bottom, there's items 1 to 7. That was the changes that were approved by members. Since that time, there's been some changes. Item 1, we said that would be to allow supporters as well as objectors to speak. We would give that a trial period of 6 months, and that 6 months is now up. There's been no issues, and therefore we're proposing to have that permanently. So basically, anybody that comments on an application is able to exercise their third-party speaking rights at committee. The other issue is item 6, where we have always had third parties come in here who were able to provide members with copies of documents, use the media presentation. That was stopped for a period because it was felt that it led to misleading information being given to members and could be confusing. However, given that we did stop it, there's been further comments from third parties and members on reflection that that was actually a good thing for people to be able to do. So what we're proposing is that it be reintroduced, but with safeguards, so that if anybody wants to put media presentations on the screen or hand out anything to members, that we need to vet it first of all, just to make sure that it's not misleading information, and that any material, whether it can be shown or not, would be to the final discretion of the chairman. So those are the only 2 items that we are proposing members vote on today. It does say that the current guidelines are appended as Appendix A. They're not. This was a legacy from a previous report. For the items that I've just explained, there would be no need really to show the full guidance. But members can see that on the website at any time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. So are we all clear on the issue now on this item? Are there any questions, comments? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, just one comment on the vetting process. Would it be worth adding an amendment to state that the officer that does the vetting isn't involved with that particular case, just to ensure impartiality?
What do you think of that?
I think, to be honest, it would be the case officer, simply because the case officer would be the one that would know the planning application in detail, and then would be able to spot whether there was any misleading information in the plans. Now, I think that in terms of impartiality, that doesn't really come into it. It's more to do with whether the plans are accurate and reflect the scheme that's actually being proposed. So my recommendation would be it would normally be the case officer, probably in consultation with myself, that would look at that material.
Ron?
Chair. Yeah, I see where Councillor O'Connell's coming from. So if the case officer does go over it and finds that it's something not, that he actually comes up and says this isn't accurate, or the reason why, and explains to the committee why he's done that. So if it's something in there that isn't accurate, and as long as we all know and it's taken out there, but he tells us why he's taken it out and what is applicable and what's not applicable. So he tells us exactly what it's all about.
I think the way it would work is that if there was a problem with information, either it would be shown with a caveat from the case officer, or if it was clearly unacceptable, then they would be told that it shouldn't be shown at all, and then we can explain that to members, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got an issue with recommendation 2. The proposals that we are rubber stamping now to implement going forward are not actually being adopted, but the minutes would seem to suggest that this has been in place since July 2017 as a trial. The thing I'm specifically referring to, and the thing that I've specifically got an issue with, is not notifying the objectives of when the planning applications are being discussed. The acknowledgement letters are being sent out. I've seen a couple in the last few days, but they are not currently including a target date of when the application is expected to be presented to committee. It does state clearly that the onus is on the objectors, but it does stress to use the internet, and not everybody has access to a computer or the internet. So I don't think it's a good idea to not notify people that have objected to planning applications, not telling them when the applications are being discussed, saying the onus is on them to look at the website or to ring Torvine, because it doesn't really give the objectors much in the way of information, other than completely putting the onus on them, and not everybody has got that, and not everybody is internet savvy. I mean, one example is my mother, who is 86, and she's recently written a letter to object to a planning application. She wouldn't be internet savvy enough to go onto the website and have a look at, try and search for the planning committee and try and see when the forthcoming dates were coming up for when a particular application was to be discussed. So I have got an issue with that, and I have got an issue that the target date is not being included in the current letters that are being sent out. So perhaps some further commentary around that, please.
Yes, this has been implemented for the last 6 months. This scheme has been on trial. Would you like to go on to that?
I think I understand what you're saying. We've got a new system in place, and it came in 2016, which is the first time we've been able to put all our applications online. Because of that, all the information that people need is online, which is the way forward. It's an efficient way of doing things. But because of those sorts of issues, we took the whole thing through scrutiny committee at the beginning of 2017. So it was fully scrutinised, the process. Members of the scrutiny committee made recommendations to the executive member, and that all came back to planning committee in April 2017. So those issues have already really been dealt with at scrutiny and through planning committee. This would mean obviously opening up that review again. I'm not aware that there's been any major problems with the process. We do advise people, if you can't look online, then contact the case officer. But we won't know when the applications are going to committee, and literally until a few weeks before, or even a week before in some instances. It depends on whether we get the information on the applications in time. So it would be very difficult to continue the process of informing people at the last minute, which it was before, but at the time that they put their comments in, we wouldn't be in a position to let them know when it's going to committee. And that was, as I said, fully assessed through the scrutiny process.
Okay.
I've got a supplementary on that, please, Chair, because I've had an issue since as a councillor, since all these planning things have gone online, particularly when we've had cyber attacks and what have you, and we've been in a situation when links have been disabled. The notification we get from planning department as councillors didn't even include the planning application reference number in. So when I was getting emails through, I would go back to planning and say, well, please let me know if any objections have been received. And in the beginning I was getting, well, what application does this relate to? Planning weren't even able to tell me based on the email that it sent out. They fixed that now by putting the planning application reference number in the title of the email. Problem is, when we get these times when security is under threat, all these links are disabled. So we're not able to view those planning applications, even as councillors. Right, so that's one thing. The second thing is today we're being asked to adopt a recommendation which clearly states in black and white acknowledgement letters should continue to be sent out to objectors along with a target date of when the application is expected to be presented to committee. Now, I've seen examples of these letters recently from a couple of objectors, and there's no mention of a target date at all in those letters. So how can we approve a procedure that was supposedly implemented back in July last year, which isn't currently being done, but yet it's in writing in front of us today to accept this motion and approve it?
Right. It has been on trial for 6 months. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chair. I've seen it. I've put it to the head of the planning department to refute this, but I have personally seen letters that have been sent out to objectors within the last week that do not include any target date information.
Yeah, because there isn't a target date yet. That's what I think.
Yeah, we wouldn't, at the time that we send out the acknowledgement letters, we wouldn't know when that application was going to committee. If we started telling people when we thought it would be going to committee, and then it doesn't go, or it goes before that, then obviously that would be misleading information. All the details are on the website, and we're trying to get people to look at the website, or to contact the case officer, who will have more of an idea of when something is likely to hit committee. But overall, this is felt to be a much better process than it was before. And there were an awful lot of complaints about what we were doing before, because it was all very late in the day in terms of people being notified. This way, they're notified much earlier in the process of when applications are likely to be going to committee.
Okay, who?
It doesn't seem to be any notification. It seems to be check our website for further details. All they get is an acknowledgement letter, acknowledging receipt of their objection, and it just purely says we put the onus entirely on you. Check the website for further details.
Yeah.
And as I said, not everyone's got access to technology or the websites.
Yeah. But the objector can ring the planning officer to be updated. And that's what I would advise you to advise people to do. And then they'll know when it's coming to committee.
But the other thing, Chair, is as well, we're still maintaining a deadline that we're insisting on for notification from any objectors, that any expressions of interest where they wish to speak at a planning committee meeting has got to be received 2 days before. If they're not being notified of when the planning committee meetings are, they're not going to know what the deadline is either for submission of expression of interest for wishing to speak at the committee meetings. So I know it's gone through scrutiny, but I'm sorry, I can't support this in the current form, because I don't think it's I think it's a reduction of the service provision. I think it's better for the objectors to have had a late notification from us, even if it only gave them a couple of days notice, than effectively what is now no notification unless they can go onto the website or speak to the planning officer.
Yeah, understand what you're saying. I think for the purpose of this report is not introducing a new procedure per se on the third parties. It's simply dealing with the first issue, which is allowing anybody that comments on an application to be able to speak at committee. And the second issue being that if somebody wants to speak, they're able to bring media presentations with them. That's all you're voting on today. If members felt that this needed to be further reviewed, then we would have to do that, probably through the scrutiny process again, but that's not what's in front of members today. It's just those two issues.
Right. Okay, who can go back to scrutiny if you feel strongly about it?
Sorry, Chair.
Right, okay. I think we're Steve next.
What I'd like to ask is, when the acknowledgement letters go out, the ones I've seen and the ones that the objectors have had, the jargon and the wording is quite complex for some.
Yeah.
And is there any possibility we could simplify it so they're able to understand and read what it actually states?
Right, we can ask the officers to do that.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Yeah, we'll have a look at it. We do it normally in consultation with corporate services to try and get the word in so that it is understandable. We've amended it several times, but we can certainly have another look at it and try and improve it, certainly.
Thank you. Stuart, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was thinking about meeting Hugh's objections to some extent, which was it would be useful if this committee had a reflection of the number of people that were dissatisfied or satisfied even with the process, because it does seem that it's an ongoing survey of objections to the process, and that would then not need it to go back to scrutiny if we had a process whereby we could reflect at, say, every 3 meetings or so, how this process was going. It's a simple enough thing to get satisfaction from, and that obviously is done by other departments. As sat in front of my scrutiny committee, for instance, resources. I don't know which scrutiny this went to. I can't remember which one it went, but it would seem that this is a simple administrative process that we could actually see how this thing was working, because there are obviously some dissatisfaction with it, and I mean I've had some myself with other things. It should be as much as possible digital, because that is the council's policy, and we've had that in front of scrutiny. If there is a problem, then there should be a help available from this council, which that was what went in front of scrutiny, and assistance for people to be able to get on the process. I totally agree with you on that one.
Right, thank you, Stuart. It went to Safer Communities scrutiny. Yes, yeah. But, yes, it can go back to scrutiny, and all the points that members bring up can be looked at. Hugh?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On a separate point, just for clarification, on page 26, 6.2, in the conclusions, it mentions supporters. Would you please clarify whether an agent who has been appointed on behalf of the person who's submitting an application would be classed as a supporter? Because the minutes say that during the 6-month trial period, there have been no supporters who've exercised their right to speak. However, I've been at planning committee meetings when objectors have come and had their chance to speak for 5 minutes, and then at the end, the agent has come in and tried to redress some of the points that have been raised by the objectors. So would an agent be classed as a supporter of the application?
No, I'd say an agent. Either the applicant themselves can speak, or they can ask their agent to speak. That's my understanding. But it wouldn't be a supporter, it would be supporting the applicant or the application itself. I don't know whether I'm wrong.
No.
Richard will put me...
No, the Chair is right. This whole process is to do with third parties, and third parties don't include the applicant or the agent. They are simply people that are commenting on an application, and we are simply saying that anybody that comments on an application, whether it be objecting or supporting, should have the right to speak. But the agent does not come under that, the third party definition. Yeah.
Stuart, you want to come in again?
Yeah, no, can I move it if nobody else is wanting to speak?
No seconding.
Could I also put a thing there that could we note the observations, please?
Yes.
Thank
so you're approving it with the observations?
Yes, please.
To be noted?
Yeah.
And it's been seconded?
Yeah.
Right. I think we can do that, can we? You can do that? Yes, yeah. Right, you ready to vote on it? Yeah. Okay, then. Approving these with members' observations added to it. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 13 for. Anyone against? 1 against. Are there any abstentions? No abstentions. So that has been agreed as far as we've gone in this report. Thank you. Right. Item agenda 5, which is application 16/P/01324. The proposal is proposed development of 9 dwellings. Oh, this is what we had before, isn't it? Land at Ardit Walk, Pont Newydd. And we had a refusal for this, and the officers were going to help us with wording. So Richard will explain where we are at this application at the moment. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, members will remember that this application was refused at the last committee, and that we were asked to bring a reason for refusal back to committee based on what members' discussion and to relate it to policy. On page 30 of the report, at the top of that page, is our suggested wording of a condition with the relevant policies in it. I need to point out to members that we have received an email from the agent on the application, that they have looked at the report and they feel, and I'll quote the email, "We do not recall councillors citing amenity as a concern or objection reason. As such, we are of the opinion that the proposed reason goes beyond the members' discussion and therefore the sentiment of your planning committee." And they've asked us to bring this to members' attention or to change the reason accordingly. Now, if you look on the reason for refusal at the top of the page, it does say on the third line down, future health and well-being of local residents and the visual amenities of the area, which I think is what the agent is talking about. What we did, we recorded comments from the members. Members were very concerned about the quality and the value of the open space. I took that to mean the quality and value in terms of recreation, in terms of being able to look out over the area, in the street scene, the visual amenity of that open space. So that's what we've included. If members don't feel that that's what they were saying, then we can take that out. If that's what members were meaning, then obviously you can consider that reason and make whatever amendments that you want to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments from members about that? No? So would you like the wording that Richard has just referred to? Right, could somebody move it then, please? Has it been moved, seconded? Right. So we are moving now to accept this wording. Could we have a show of hands on that, please? 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. That's 13 again. Anyone against? 1 against. Are there any abstentions? No abstentions. So we have accepted this wording as our reasons for refusing the application. Thank you. Right, agenda item 6, which is application 17/P/0962. Did you want to say something, Stuart?
Yeah, on this application, I just realised that the Congress Theatre is mentioned. I'm on the board of that. Do I have to declare on that?
Over to our legal officer.
Right, Councillor Ashley. You're a member of the board of the Congress Theatre. Yeah. The Congress Theatre is one of the buildings that's going to be affected by this refurbishment, proposed refurbishment, isn't it? Yes? Yes. Yes. And can I ask you, have you been at board meetings where these proposals have been discussed and considered by the board? Yes. And presumably there have been discussions around it, have there? Right, okay. I think on balance, Councillor Ashley, my advice would be that it's certainly a personal interest, and because it's not crystal clear to me, I would err on the side of caution. My advice would be to declare a prejudicial interest, because I think that the business under discussion certainly arguably affects an organisation in which you have an interest, arguably a controlling interest as a member of the board. And the safest course of conduct, in my view, would be for you to go out, but obviously up to you. Okay.
Right, thank you, Tim, for that. We'll wait for Councillor Ashley now to leave the meeting, and then we'll continue. Okay, as I was saying, item agenda 6, application number 17/P/0962. The proposal is for public realm improvements to Gwent Square, including new lighting, provision of street furniture and soft and hard landscaping, replacement of existing trees and overcladding of Monmouth House, Congress Theatre, House of Fraser, the library and former public house. And of course the site is Gwent Square, and it's over to Craig now, and he will give us a quick presentation on the application. Thank you, Craig.
The application that's been submitted has been submitted by M&G Real Estate as the owners of Cranbranton Centre, and their proposal is to enhance Gwent Square, which, as you go there, is quite outdated at the moment, is to enliven the space, increase vitality, viability, and make it more attractive to visitors and shoppers alike. So, taking about Gwent Square as the actual square as the first phase, the proposal is to put new paving around Gwent Square, obviously on the lower element of Gwent Square and the upper element of Gwent Square. A new set of steps to replace there, which are much softer. The bandstand is to be removed and replaced by a tensile structure. And then on the upper area, new decking and tree planting to replace the existing trees. There was a tree report submitted with the application, and that's been accepted by the council's tree officer to remove those trees and replace with new, and also additional seating here and more seating at the lower element of Gwent Square when you pave in to bring it up to more modern standards as an environment. Then to sort of go through the buildings, the cladding that's being proposed. House of Fraser is to be clad, it's like metal sheeting in a gold colour. It's got little holes in it, which means you can still see the windows on the upper floors to let light into the upper floors of House of Fraser, where the offices are, and obviously where the upper floors of the store, and a proposal to advertising on the corner of Gwent Square to act as a key feature. Go to the Congress Theatre, then the proposal is to reclad the frontage on at the moment. Obviously that wasn't the original frontage when the Congress Theatre was constructed. So the proposal is to take off the facade that's on there at the moment and replace with what's here, which actually gives the theatre a presence which it's never had with the current frontage on there. When you're there at the moment, the only sign to the Congress is a little bit between the bandstand and the building. So here you've got the theatre being given a real presence, bilingual as well. The M&G, as the owners have gone to the Congress Theatre, as Councillor Ashley's gone out, where they've shown these proposals, and the Congress Theatre are in support of these proposals because it helps them become a real presence in the town, and obviously potentially could help them with their future viability, that more people know where the Congress Theatre is in the town. And then you can see the former Square Inn as well. The proposal is to put sort of wooden cladding on the top to really improve the environment there, that hopefully will help them let that unit that's been vacant since the Square Inn was closed. And you can see the Congress doors at the bottom there, and the structure. And I think the reason for moving the bandstand is, again, to give that visibility to the theatre, and the tent style that's there will help with events. They can still hold events under that cover as well, where I think the poppy sellers are there, obviously, at that time of year, so it's something for those. And you can see some of the improvements to the steps there, and obviously a new bench along the lower edge of Gwent Square. Again, looking back, standing in front of the Square Inn now, looking across where you've got sort of Tiger and River Island, they improve into the facade at the top, where at the moment is quite a dour pebble dash finish, again enlivening the square and creating a much fresher look for the town centre. No proposals to do anything to Gwent House on the level there, where you've got the sort of the mosaics that are across there in the banks, but then obviously the library building on the other side is again to be improved with wooden slat facades along there, and new signage as well to give the library a bit of visibility. And you can see the sort of the improvements to the paving that's happening in the main part of Gwent Square. In terms of objections, there was sort of one comment in from one of the retailers about how it's going to work in terms of construction, which obviously the owner of the centre are liaising with those. Comments were generally supportive of the application. I think the council's ecologist officer wanted a bat survey done, so I think there had been visibility of bats there in the past, and they've done an up-to-date survey and there's no bat activity within the town centre. So yeah, it's just a proposal to enhance and enliven whereas it's quite an outdated part of Cumbrae Town Centre. So is there any questions?
Thank you, Craig. Who was first? We'll have ladies first, shall we say?
It looks really nice. I was just going to say, obviously, hopefully, all the cladding has been tested and is all fireproof and it meets regulations properly.
That would, yeah. That would do. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Hugh?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Do you have a photo of the existing facade of the theatre?
I've got it in the file, not on the presentation, but I've got it in the file if you want to look at it now.
I'm trying to go from memory. Where's the clock with the man and the woman that come out? Is that on the front of the theatre, or is that the other side?
Of the theatre. The statues are on the top. So you've got the works underneath, with the front there in the blue, and then you've got the sort of reddish colour and orange at the top, and this sort of looks like pine, looks like an alpine type facade on it.
So I see I've got concerns about doing away with that, which has been part of the history of the town for a very long time.
Statues or the clock? Or
the statues and the clock.
Okay.
Also, from that top picture, it's not clear to me. It looks as if the facade of the theatre's been extended right the way over to meet House of Fraser. At the moment,
there is a gap there.
At the moment, you can access all the further additional shops between the theatre and the bit that's under covered walkway. That is the main thoroughfare to quite a number of other shops and banks and the other square, the other side.
Yeah, the walkway will remain. It's just the way that the buildings look on the walkway is still maintained going up towards the bus station. If I go through points about the clock and the statue, obviously the statues were never originally part of that facade, and they were added at a later date. From the council's conservation officer, there's no architectural or historical reason for them to be maintained and protected on the building. They're to be removed by M&G. They're not to be disposed of. I think M&G are planning on holding them to see what to do with them in the future, but not to put them back on the building. In terms of the clock, I understand from conversations that the clock is no longer working. There's an issue in terms of who is responsible for maintaining that, whether it's the theatre or M&G. But my understanding from removing the clock, that it will free up space within the theatre, allow them to put more additional seats in. The mechanism for the clock is actually in the Congress Theatre, so the rows of seats in there are being blocked by the mechanism of the clock. So by removing the clock, it gives the theatre a better internal space, but also gives a better finish here, where you've got the Congress Theatre and all the writing on there of what it is would be potentially be detracted by retaining the clock or putting back a replacement clock. So that's the justification for the removal of the clock, and the statues again were added at a later date, weren't original. There's no historic or architectural merit for them to be protected.
I'm just mindful of the fact, Chair, that Newport went ahead with plans in John Frost Square that included the removal of the mural and the backlash that they faced for that because it was enormously unpopular. I would be more minded to support this application if there was a condition in there to reinstate the clock and to reinstate the statue, if they didn't want it on the front of the theatre, to make plans to reinstate it elsewhere within the square, because there is a park and wall to feature the other side, and perhaps something could be done, around the other side. But I think, if it's been there a long time, it's part of the local history of the area, and it is an attractive, they are, I think, attractive visual features that should be retained if they're going to be removed from this site and perhaps incorporated elsewhere. I would be very reluctant to approve an application that does away with them altogether.
They're obviously proposing to take them away altogether. They have done public consultation as part of the pack submitted application. I think in the design access statement, it's got a list of the comments there. And I think when M&G did the public consultation, I think a lot of people were supportive of the proposals there. But obviously, we can look at the statue and the clock. I'd ideally recommend that they're not retained on the building because it would impact on what's being proposed there, and the the presents the theatre would be given, but we could look at with M&G about the retention of them in some form. But I don't think they should go back onto that building. I think that would detract from the building.
Right, thank you for that, Hugh. I know how you feel. I mean, we're all very fond of the clock and the revolving little statues, but I don't think it's within the gift of this committee to put those sort of, how can I say, suggestions in. We'll ask Richard what he thinks about it.
Yeah, I think the scheme is as presented. It's been well thought out, and I think you couldn't just put a condition on there to put the clock back because it alters the whole scheme. So I couldn't put a condition on there to do with that. I think the members need to look at the scheme as a whole. My view is a vast improvement. It's good that there's an investment in the town. It will give a fresher look. I think the reasoning for the clock has been explained, but it's up to members as to what they think now.
For that. I got Jason next on my list.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My comments have been pretty much picked up by Councillor Bevan, in that rather than making poor old Diane Mathanwy redundant, can't we facilitate their removal into another part of town? They are, I think, valued, but this, on the whole, is a fantastic opportunity to revitalise the central part of town and modernise it. And when we're looking to compete with areas such as Newport to the south, any investment should be broadly welcomed, I think.
Right, thank you for that, Jason. Janet, did you want to come in?
Sorry, just going to say, yes, it definitely is an improvement. It'll make a softer side of Cumbrae. But if we disapprove, what is the timescale for getting the work done?
My understanding is that the Board of M&G have approved the investment here to be made. I think they were looking to implement during this, looking at Ricky, they're looking to implement these works in this year.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I think it's Steve next I got on my list.
Well, this year will be the improvement for Christmas.
I've got two questions. The first is, when the work is actually proposed going on, how will the noise levels be, particularly with a lot of shoppers shopping around that area? And the other is, what about the impact with the work going on, where the vehicles that are actually doing the work going to be parked? Because Cumbrae shopping is such a very busy place for parking and everything else. I'm just concerned that where the vehicles are going to go to stop the people coming in shopping anyway.
Yeah, as part of the application, they were submitted a construction environmental management plan that dealt with those issues, and hopefully Paul from the Highway section will be able to give you a bit more detail on his thoughts on that plan that was submitted, how all that construction work is going to take place.
Right, over to the Highways Office.
Thank you, Chair. Realistically, it would be down to MG to control this from a health and safety standpoint. They own the town centre. There are a number of access points into the town. I would imagine that you would probably have lots of hoarded off areas during construction that would be done in a phased system. You'd probably have cranes in the town centre lifting cladding. All these sorts of operations do go on in town centres when improvements are being made. I share your point that there are a lot of people that are in the town centre, but it would be really down to MG to manage that from a health and safety standpoint. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Richard Overton, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Along with my colleagues, I welcome this scheme. It will make a great difference to what I would consider to be brutalist architecture of Gwent Square. However, I do have one caveat, and it's similar to Councillor Bevan's caveat, and mine is the aesthetic of the bandstand. A bandstand is a part of a traditional British town and what I see replacing it doesn't seem to consider tradition at all. But apart from this, I do welcome the scheme.
Right, thank you, Richard. Perhaps the officer will answer that.
Yeah, I think that the reason for removing the bandstand was more about the visibility of the theatre and allowing the theatre to have that main entrance point that is blocked. When you go up the steps that are there at the moment, the bandstand does detract from the entrance to the Congress. So I think the reason they've done this is to go around with the modern environment they're creating with the facades they're putting up, is to create something in keeping with those facades, and offering something else in its place that still allows events and sort of poppy collections, etc., that time of year, and other events they have throughout the year to still take place under that sort of canopy. But I think the main reason for doing it was to help give the theatre a proper entrance rather than being hidden behind the bandstand.
Thank you very much for the explanation.
Right, are there any more questions or comments on this application? Right.
Just one more, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you for permitting me to come back in again. I mean, I'm in favour broadly, in favour of the scheme to bring about the improvements to Gwent Square. I am concerned, as I said, about the loss of local historical features such as the clock, the statues, and I hadn't noticed until my colleague Councillor Overton had pointed out that the bandstand was effectively going as well. This seems to give an awful lot of preeminence, if you like, to both House of Fraser and the theatre. Have we got any thoughts about that in particular with regards to the theatre? Because I didn't think it was that long ago that the future of the theatre itself was looking very very much in jeopardy financially, and the concern that we're giving so much preeminence now, not just in terms of signage and frontage to the theatre, but in terms of removing the bandstand as well. If it's not going to be a going concern into a few years down the line, the theatre's forced to close, then we've done all of this for nothing.
Obviously, the investment's been made by a private company. M&G is the owner. The council aren't putting any assistance into the improving the facade. That's all been done by the private landlord. Obviously, yes, there are issues about sort of those groups throughout the county borough and throughout the UK. But in terms of giving this a presence, might help give it some financial stability and make it more attractive to people. People actually know where it is. I think they've mentioned where they've done events in the past and said, the Congress themselves, when they've been out in Gwent Square asking people, do you know where the Congress is? A lot of people have said no when they're in Gwent Square and hadn't realised the Congress is behind them. So hopefully by doing this, it could create it more attractive and attract more people to be there, which will help this financial long-term sustainability. But the council's doing no work. The work is all being done and paid for by M&G Real Estate.
One final question, Chair. As we're, in effect, as Councillor Overton pointed out, we're losing an amenity here in terms of the bandstand. Has any thought been given to M&G building a bandstand somewhere else within the borough, in one of the parks, for example, to replace the one that will be torn down from Cwmbran Square?
It's not the council that are doing this. It's a privately owned town. The owners of the town have put this application in, so it isn't the council.
I didn't say it was the council, Chair. I said M&G.
All right. Well, if M&G have a mind to move the bandstand somewhere else, that's up to them. To be a good idea if one is needed, in another place. I don't know whether.
What I asked, Chair, was has the planning department given any consideration in discussions with M&G, because we are losing an amenity here, a bandstand, as my colleague pointed out. Surely consideration should have been given to replacing this somewhere else in the borough.
Yeah, Richard will answer this on behalf of the planners.
I think M&G could remove the bandstand now anyway without planning permission. It's something that they control. It's in private ownership, and if they wanted to get rid of it, they could do that right now. we are looking at in relation to a whole scheme, in terms of any Section 106 agreement that requires them to build the bandstand elsewhere, in my view as a professional officer, that wouldn't be an appropriate use of Section 106. It's not material to the application, and as I said, the fallback position is they could remove it anyway. So I would say, from a planning point of view, that wouldn't be appropriate for this application. In other words, we couldn't stop them from removing it anyway.
Okay, who?
Yeah, I'm surprised at that answer, but I have to take it, yeah.
Right, John Hawler next.
I've attended the Congress Theatre on sellout nights, so I see that they need extra seating, and the removal of the clock would help. Have we any ideas how much extra seating would be generated by the removal?
No. I don't know the exact number. But yeah, I think the Council's Arts Officer, as part of the pre-application discussions, identified that the clock does take up area in there, and it would gain more seats. I don't know the exact number, but it would gain more. I think, as you said, sort of when you're there in the evening as well, that obviously they're improving the facade of the former Square Inn, so that potentially could help make that more attractive and attract more people there as an eatery, etc. in the future. But in terms of the number of seats, I wouldn't like to guess, but there would be an increase in the space available to the Congress by removing the clock.
Okay, John. Right, I've got two more speakers, Ron and then Jason.
Thank you, Chair. I worked on this application. It's a long time coming along to brighten the town centre up, and I would move that we accept the officer's recommendation with conditions to pass this application.
Ron. Do you want to come in first, Jason, before we have a second?
Yeah, very briefly, just on Councillor Bevan's last point, I don't see the bandstand as being removed. I see its construction being changed from what is now a red block with a more traditional roof to a more modern white canopy, which means we wouldn't lose the amenity at all. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jason. Right, we've had a proposal to accept the application. Is that a seconder? It's been seconded. Right, we're ready to vote to approve the application. How many is that? 12, that's 13, 4. And anyone against? One against. Any abstentions? No, that application has been approved. What's that? We're on, yes, I'll tell him now. Item agenda 7. Yes, okay, Councillor Overton. I'll proceed when Councillor Overton has left the chamber. Okay, then we'll proceed now. Application number 18/P/0120, and the proposal is the proposed installation of a 15-metre Jupiter S-pole supporting 3 number antenna, 2 number 300-metre transmission dishes, together with associated ground-based cabinets and ancillary development thereto. And it's sited at Land at the Highway, New Inn, Pontypool, Torfaen. Sarah Hensby is now going to say something about this application. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a prior notification. Previously, back in August last year, a similar application came in for the same pole and cabinets, but in a slightly different position. That application was refused because of the following reason. The proposed apparatus is sited within the public footpath immediately adjacent to a surface level bus stop. This would create an unnecessary obstruction to passers-by, which is not in the interest of highway safety. The proposed site would also prevent the future potential of a future bus stop enclosure. That application was then appealed by the agents. The appeal is still ongoing. However, they've submitted a revised scheme. So this is the actual mast and the cabinets here. This is the previous refused scheme, so you can see the position of the actual mast, and then the cabinets and the apparatus that actually that are required to be sited in close proximity to the actual mast in order for it to actually work. And this is the actual bus boarding platform. So that's the actual scheme that was refused on highway safety grounds. The revised scheme keeps the mast in the same position, but actually moves the cabinets further south to this location here to actually overcome the reason for refusal. We have had a late objection on this application from the Community Council saying that it's too close to public amenities, the residential area and the school, and would obstruct a potential bus shelter. In terms of being close to amenities, it is in the neighbourhood centre of Newing. In terms of residential area, the closest residential property is actually on the opposite side of the road, so you can see the bus stop here, and the closest residential property is actually on the other side of the road, over 20 metres away. There are other properties as well. So basically the car park here is a public car park with and beyond that there are residential properties which are even further away. So it would be seen within the street scene, and it would be seen by residential properties, but it's not immediately adjacent to them. The other issue that they've raised in terms of close to a school, I think that's referring back to a previous application back in April last year, which would cover the same coverage area for this mast. However, it's not close to Newing Primary School at all. And obviously, as stated in the report and what I've just stated, the cabinets have been moved away from the bus stop, so that would actually be positioned out further south along the actual road, so that it wouldn't interfere with any potential bus shelter in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, are there any questions? Ron?
Thank you, Sarah. The land, who does the land belong to?
It's actually highway, so the surface is highway, I believe, but in terms of the actual ownership of the land underneath, I wouldn't know. It's not highway verged, I think.
Yes, the highways officer would like to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. If you look at the photograph there, the car park in the green area, that's actually owned by a housing association. The footway is ours, and the cabin is highway, and the cabinets are being sited in the highway, but they are now being sited away from the bus stop, which was satisfactory to us, and that's where really we wanted them to site them in the first place.
Do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to get at. I mean, they don't own the company don't own the land. It's ours, then, is it? So we're allowing it. So they're buying the land off us,
Or leasing it.
or leasing the land. What?
Yes,
So
the
how does it
will
work
come
then?
in and he'll explain this to you.
Yeah.
Start-day undertakers have a right to go in public highway, and these cabinets will be in public highway, and they have a right to do that. So that they don't have to buy highway land. So it was in the green land there, the green verge, and that belonged to somebody else other than the Highway Authority. I think it belongs to the Housing Association. they would need, if they wanted to site them there, they would need to come to negotiate with them, with the landowner. But they don't really have to negotiate with the Highway Authority, other than us suggesting where they put them is unsafe, and we like them to put them in a better place within the highway. Does that clarify it?
Yeah. Just,
Thank you.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I think Stuart wants to come in now.
Yeah, I just did a quick calculation. 17.5 metre mast is, if I'm in old money, is 61 foot, isn't it? I've just done the calculation. And you're proposing to site it more or less where that bit of green is? Yeah. So, and they're not moving that, it's still in the same place. So it's a dirty great mast by old money, and it's in that verge. So it's going to obstruct that. We've had a few in front of this committee like that, haven't we? And I mean, in terms of visual amenity and obstructing views and being rather, I can understand why people are not too happy about it. Is there any guidance on where these things are sited in terms of visual and amenity, and why people in terms of where we put them? Because we've turned down a few here. Any guidance at all, please?
In terms of the actual height of it, it is slightly less than that. It is actually only 15 metres, which is obviously 2.5 metres lower. I don't know what that is in old money, sorry.
What is it?
15 metres.
15 metres?
Yeah, 1.5.
That would be like 50 odd metres still pretty big, isn't it?
In terms of the actual visual amenity of it, then yes, it would be visible. It is a neighbourhood centre where you expect this kind of equipment to actually be. It is required in terms of the application has been submitted with details of what area it needs to cover and the services it needs to provide. So it needs to be in an area where people actually are using the actual facility. In terms of the actual application and the previous reason for refusal, visual amenity wasn't a reason for refusal in the previous application. It was just the impact on the highway safety. So obviously at the moment, the current application going to appeal is going to appeal on the highway safety aspect of it rather than the visual amenity.
Louise wants to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Has there been any sort of consultation in the community and the surrounding area? Is this mass required, or is it just Vodafone sort of expanding the business opportunity?
Does the planning officer want to come in with that one?
In terms of consultations, as you can see in the report, neighbours were consulted on the application. They've actually been consulted on 3 separate applications over the last year. I haven't had any neighbour comments in at all on the actual application. For the initial application, which is a planning application rather than a prior notice, a site notice also went up on site, actually on the bus stop, which obviously is used by the local community. Didn't receive any objections from members of the public. The only objections have been from ward members and the community council. In terms of actually expanding the actual network, there is maps produced by the applicants to actually show what they refer to as not spots, where there are difficulties, and this is something that this is effectively their fourth attempt to try and overcome that not spot. So there is a requirement there. They are sharing the mass. It's 2 companies coming forward together so that they can actually use one mass to serve both Vodafone and Telefonica. So it's 2 companies coming together to use a one mass.
Okay with that, Louise? Right. Who has indicated he wants to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As somebody who happens to live in a not spot, I'm obviously one of these people who's affected by poor mobile phone coverage. So, and I'm actually with one of the applicants. So, theoretically, I should be supportive of this because I'd love them to improve my coverage where I live. I think there is an issue with the visual impact that this is going to have, whether it's 17.5 metre high post or 15 metre high post. It's only a 2.5 metre reduction. It's still going to be a very large post, which in turn will support 3 antennae. My question, again, it ties into the proximity of this. If you could go back to your photograph, please, of the local area. It looks as though that is on, well, it's not quite so prominent in that feature, but yeah, it looks like there's a hill there. And my question, I thought the obvious thing would have been that perhaps the applicant would have consulted Torfaen Planning. I don't know, but to me it makes sense that they would have had greater coverage if they could get the mast on the highest point of land or near the high point of land. It seems that where this is being proposed, it's actually some way down in a dip. If you look at the hill going up down that way, and from the opposing view as well. Did the applicant approach Torfaen with a view to having an alternative site on higher ground to get more coverage?
It's over to the highways planning officer.
As part of the submission, the actual applicant has to come in with a list of sites that they've looked at and discarded for various reasons. Obviously, some of them can be that landowners don't want things sited on their own land, or also obstructions such as trees or other buildings. And as I've already stated, this is the 4th application to cover this not spot. So we have actually, the first application was refused due to being close to the primary school. The second application, as prior notice, was actually withdrawn by the applicant because where they were proposing to site it was over a culvert. The third application is the one that's actually going to appeal at the moment in terms of planning committee refused it due to the impact on highway safety and the bus stop. So they have gone through looking at the most appropriate sites to actually put the actual mast. In terms of you referring to 3 actual antennae on it, it's actually shrouded, the actual mast. Sorry, I can't. Unfortunately, I can't go back on it at the moment, but the actual plan that was shown before, where it was basically a thin pole that actually went wider at the top, that's actually got the antennae inside it, so there's a shroud around it. So you've probably seen them across the borough, you might notice them now that we've been talking about them, that actually it's a mast, and there's no actual external things on it at all. It's just a wider at the top where it's actually shrouded the actual the antenna, so it's internal, the actual antennae on it.
Please. Okay. Is that why this is being considered for approval now, when the previous application has been rejected by this committee? Is it because of that shrouding? I mean, in terms of the actual movement, yes, you mentioned there's been a segregation now of the cabinet and the antennae, but really it doesn't appear to have moved significantly. It's just a bit tinkering around the bus stop, really, and having one side and one the other side. But in terms of proximity to housing, that hasn't changed at all. We're still only 20 metres away from the nearest property over the road, and there are a number of other houses that will be in close proximity to this as well. So is it normal that, well, first off, is it the application now being considered because part of the antenna is shrouded? And 2, would it be normal practice to have one of these masts so close to people's residences?
Right. Is Richard coming in on this? Or?
Yes. In terms of the shroud's always been proposed on the actual application. In terms of bringing it forward to planning committee now, the previous refusal didn't refer to any visual impact or impact on residential properties. It was solely on a highway safety reason only. It wasn't. So in terms of when you say just tinkering with the location, that location has been changed to actually overcome the highway reason for refusal. So my understanding is that you can't move the cabinets too far away from a mast because they have to be located together for functional reasons, but obviously they've been able to move them away so that it doesn't have an impact on the actual bus stop and the boarding platform there. So in terms of it coming to committee, it's coming to committee because of it overcoming the previous reason for refusal. Sorry. So in terms of proximity to residents, the application has been submitted with an ICNIRT certificate basically saying that the health and well-being shouldn't be affected by the actual development. In terms of being 20 metres away from neighbouring residents, that's the closest resident and that's on the opposite side of the road, so it's not considered to have an overbearing or yes, it will be seen, but it won't be a prominent view. It's not immediately outside the front door of a property or the front window of the property. It is over 20 metres away.
Okay.
Is there a legal requirement for distance between premises and these masts, antennae masts? Is there a minimum legal requirement? Because I know that in the States there's been issues raised over health concern on people's health and well-being if they have to live within close proximity of these radio masts because of the frequencies.
Yes, this application does come with a certificate, as the planning officer said, of safety. But I'll ask if there are any regulations and if we're within those.
The requirement, as the Chair says, is to provide the ICNIRT certificate. There isn't a minimum distance that it has to be from residential properties. It could be immediately adjacent to residential properties. So there isn't a minimum requirement, a distance away. The requirement is the ICNIRT health certificate to actually be submitted with the application.
You okay now? Right. Jason and then Ron.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick points. In terms of the siting of it, I mean, these companies are experts in their field. They know telecommunications inside and out. So in terms of the siting and its ability to eliminate the not spot, that's certainly not a concern I share. I think when we do consider this application, you need to maybe take a broader view and consider the wider benefit that it has to the whole community. I think it'll alleviate problems for thousands of residents across Torfaen. Also appreciate the ones across the road, maybe one or two houses there might feel slightly aggrieved. In terms of benefit, I think it'll have a fantastic impact. And given the fact that it was rejected at the last application due to a highways concern, which as far as I can see is now been mitigated, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't support this application.
Right. Ron, do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just concur with Jason there. Looking at this, it's very unusual to see an application without any representation. I mean, normally you get dozens. 11 properties have been consulted, and there's not one objection. So I feel as though I couldn't object to it when people around feel that there might be a need for it, as Jason said, to cover the area. I mean, we all get hot spots where we can't get our phones, so I'd feel guilty if I was objecting to this and turn it down when the neighbours are not concerned with it at all. So I will be approving it, putting approval through, and we do accept this recommendation in the officers.
A proposal? Yes. Thank you. Is there a second? Yes, you can comment on it.
Just for the record, based on the council's previous comments, he's not actually factually correct to say that there haven't been any objections raised to this. My three colleagues who represent the New Inn ward of all three of them unanimously objected to this particular planning application. So it's not right to say that there's been no objections raised. And in terms of how many objections have come from the community, I don't know. You'd have to ask those particular councillors who represent that ward. But all three of them unanimously have objected to this particular proposal going ahead.
We have
so it's not right to say there's been no objections received.
We have noted the objections from the elected members, but there have been no objections from the residents around this area. Ron, did you want to come back?
Exactly what I want to say.
Oh, right,
it's
right.
The neighbourhood.
Yes. Right, thank you. Right, we've had a proposal and it's been seconded. Any other comments before we vote? So the proposal was to accept this application, approve it. Right. Show of hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 for. Those against? 1 against. Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Right, that application has been approved. Right, that's the last application on today's agenda. I thank you all for your attendance and I close the meeting.